Let us now look at our main work area, which is the 3D viewport. In the top left corner, we can see a little drop down here, and this will change the 3D window type. In actual fact, this is true for all of the window types. Okay, so we could change this 3D window to, say, a shader editor, a node editor. But we're working with a model, so we want it in 3D. Beside that, we've got our modes between object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, vertex paint, and so on. And we already know how to change this because we set up our preferences with the tab key and the pie menu. So a shortcut for this button here is tab, and let us choose object mode. Now you'll notice down the left here that these buttons change. They are context sensitive depending what mode you're in. These are your tools. So for example, if I tab into edit mode, we're now presented with a completely different set of tools. We will go over these later. This tool panel can be slid in and out with the T key, T for tools. Okay. The other way is we will see there's a little arrow up in the corner here. We can just click that. Similarly, on the other side of the 3D viewport, we've got another panel, which is our properties panel. And we can slide that in and out with the N key. Okay. Next, while we're in edit mode, we'll see we've got three little buttons here, and these correspond to what we are going to select. We got the vertex select, the edge select, and the face select. Okay, so in vertex select, I can select a single vertex, or I can shift and select multiple vertices. Okay. In edge select, the dots on the vertices disappear, and I'm only now able to select edges, but I can shift and select multiple edges. And face select, that all disappears, and I can select single faces at a time. You will swap between these a lot depending on what you're doing. Okay, let's go back into object mode. Next we've got basically the window menu, where we can see what we can view, different things, cameras, viewport. We can go to the top, we can go to the front, we can use our middle mouse button and kind of pan around. Okay. Next is select for selecting certain functions. Add for adding new mesh types. So if I was to delete this cube and add, I could add a new mesh cube. But I added a plane, so let me Control Z backwards. Add mesh cube. Okay. And next is an object menu, which contains a lot of commands for things like snapping your object to the grid and things like that. We will go through them as we progress. Over in the middle here, we have a couple of functions. One is the orientation, the world orientation. Okay, so if I was to, for example, just select this transform button so I can see my axis. Global, the orientation of the axis on the object matches that of the grid of the world. If I was to change that to local, it'll look the same. Okay, but if I was to rotate this, and for rotating it I'm just going to use the R key and along the Z axis or the Z axis, so RZ, rotate this slightly. You will see how the axis of the cube has changed from the world axis. It's following the local axis of the cube. If I change this back to global, you'll see how it aligns with the world again. Okay, the next button is pivot points. Generally speaking, 99% of the time you'll be working in medium point. We will cover these later on. but it's not too important now. Next is the snap to tool, where it'll snap your geometry to adjacent geometry. What's the best way to explain this? Let me just go into edit mode, and I'm going to duplicate this cube and bring it along. Okay, you see how my cube is kind of jumping? Because it is snapping in increments. Now if I was to snap it to, say, edge, okay, and I grab this cube, not much is happening because let me go, because I'm in face mode for starters. Let me go into vertex mode. Let me snap to vertex. Right, you see how that vertex is starting to snap? So we can get quite accurate modeling this way. I'm going to turn the snap off. And finally here we have proportional edit. What proportional edit will do is, if I grab this vertex here, with that turned on, if I go to grab this, you'll see this circle. I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse to increase and decrease this circle. So if I increase this circle to cover the whole object, and I then go to grab, you can see the whole object is moving. Okay. If I decrease this circle, so it's only covering part of the object, let's get a bigger part. It's only affecting those parts that are within the circle. Okay, let's turn that off. Here we have object types visibility. Most of all, we'll leave this alone. It's just showing us what will show up on the screen, the different types of things. Here we have viewport gizmos. This is a new feature. I would pretty much leave these alone for the minute. We'll come back to them. Here we have overlays, what we can see and can't see on the screen. Things like the grid floor, or the axis we can turn off and on to suit. Okay. Once again, we will go down to most of this. I would leave pretty much alone for now. This one is like an X-ray, so if we can look at our object here, we can only see the vertices that are in front of the object from our view. If I turn on the X-ray, you can see all the vertices on the object. Okay, so I'm able here to select, say, a vertex behind and grab it without having to scroll around. Okay. Then we have our view types. So we've got a wireframe view. We've got a solid shaded view. Let me turn X-ray off. Okay, so we've got a wireframe. We've got a solid shaded. We've got this new one which is called Look Dev. There you go, my blender froze for a second, which gives us a slightly different view. And this will actually show textures when we have textures applied. And then we have a rendered view. Finally, let's come to this little group of buttons and widgets down here. Let me just go back into object mode. Before I do this, let me just replace this cube, or this mangled up cube. So I'm going to delete this with the delete key, and I'm going to Shift A and add a new cube in the center here. Right, this first button, it toggles between orthographic and perspective view. What's the difference? Well, perspective view, which we're in now, how to explain this? Okay, one second, let me just duplicate this cube. Okay, we'll come back to this first cube. When we look in perspective view, the cube behind seems smaller than this one. It is exactly the same dimensions, but because this one is nearer, it appears bigger. if we go into orthographic view, the cube behind will look bigger. Once again, it is exactly the same dimensions, but on screen it's a bit of an optical illusion. But this measurement here is identical to this measurement here. They are the same. But because this is behind, it looks bigger in orthographic view. Okay, orthographic view is very useful when doing precise modeling or modeling to a plan or something like that. If you're more kind of freestyling it, perspective gives you a more realistic view. Okay, the next button here comes to our camera view. If we click on this, we come into the view that the actual camera is looking at. This is our camera here, so we can see it's pointing at this cube. And if I go into camera view, that's exactly what it is. Now, we don't use camera a lot because we're making models for Second Life. We're not doing renders, but it's useful to have this view and know how to, if you are doing a render, knowing where your borders are and how it's going to look. Okay, the hand button here allows you to move the screen around. So if I just click on that and drag, you can see how the screen is following my my mouse. So for example, if I wanted to get a better view of this cube behind, I could move it into the center of the screen. And this magnifying glass, allows you to zoom in and out of whatever's in the center. It zooms to the center of the screen. Okay, so if I click and hold that and drag my mouse up, it zooms towards the center. And if I drag my mouse down, it zooms out. Incidentally, the scroll wheel on your mouse does the same thing. The difference with the scroll wheel is it scrolls to the mouse position because we set that up in our preferences. So for example, if I was to hold my mouse over here, it's going to scroll in towards that cube, whereas if I hold it over here, it's going to scroll in towards that cube. Okay, then we have our movement widget. We can basically look at any view in this using this. So if I wanted to look from the top, I'd look from the Z. I'll just click the Z. If I wanted to look from the front, I would click the Y, or the right actually is Y, X, red X. And if I wanted to look from the front, I would click the Y. Okay. Now if I wanted to look from behind, you see there's another red dot here, or from the left actually. There's another red dot here which is the same color as the X, but it doesn't have the X in it, and that will look from the left, or I can do that with the Y to look from behind. Okay. So those are our widgets. Let me delete this cube. Select this and delete it. Just pressing the delete key once it's selected. And next we'll have a look at mesh types, standard mesh types.